Welcome back to channel. When Jesus declared, "I and the Father are one," he was not claiming a privilege reserved for himself alone. He was revealing the fundamental truth of your own being, a truth that has been hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years. This statement is not theology. It is the master key to spiritual healing, abundance, and inner peace that transforms everything. Most people hear these words and think Jesus was speaking only of his unique relationship with God. But Joel Goldsmith understood what the mystics have always known. Jesus was teaching the universal principle of identity. He was showing you that the same infinite consciousness that flowed through him flows through you right now in this very moment without exception. The tragedy is that humanity has worshipped the man instead of practicing the principle. We have made Jesus exceptional rather than exemplary. We have placed him on a pedestal so high that his teachings became unreachable. But today you are going to discover what happens when you truly understand what he meant, and your life will never be the same again. The phrase, "I and the Father are one," is not a statement about Jesus, the person walking the dusty roads of Galilee. The I he spoke of is not the human form, the body, or the personality. It is the divine consciousness, the infinite, invisible presence that he recognized as his true identity. When you understand this distinction, everything in your spiritual life shifts dramatically. Joel Goldsmith spent decades helping people realize this truth through his teachings and writings. He taught that the moment you recognize your oneness with the Father, you are no longer living as a separate human being hoping for divine intervention from somewhere outside yourself. You are living as the very presence of God expressing itself in human form. Consider what this means practically in your daily experience. When you say, "I am," you are speaking the name of God revealed to Moses in the burning bush. Every time you declare your true identity, you are invoking infinite power, wisdom, and supply. But if you follow "I am" with limitation, like "I am sick" or "I am poor," you deny your oneness with the Father. Here is what begins to happen when this realization takes root in your consciousness and transforms your experience. First, you stop begging God for things as if the divine were separate from you and withholding good. You recognize that the Father's infinite abundance is already the substance of your being, closer than your breath, nearer than your hands and feet. Second, you lose the fear of lack, disease, and death that has controlled humanity for millennia. These things seem real only when you believe you are a separate mortal being disconnected from your source. But when you realize I and the Father are one, you understand that infinite life is your true nature. Nothing can be added to you and nothing can be taken away from you. Third, your prayers change completely from begging to recognition, from pleading to resting in truth. You no longer ask God to heal you because you realize there is no separation between you and the healing presence. You simply recognize what is already true. Wholeness, completeness, and perfection are your spiritual reality. And this recognition becomes the healing itself. Joel Goldsmith called this understanding Christ consciousness. And it is not reserved for saints or mystics alone. It is your birthright, your true identity that has been waiting for you to claim it. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was pointing to this exact realization. The infinite is not distant. It is the very consciousness reading these words right now. But here is where most spiritual seekers make a critical mistake that blocks their progress entirely. They try to become one with God through effort, meditation techniques, or moral perfection. They believe oneness is something they must achieve in the future. This is impossible because oneness is not a goal. It is already the fact of your being established before the world began. You cannot become what you already are. You can only recognize it, accept it, and live from it consciously. This recognition is what Jesus demonstrated throughout his ministry. He did not heal people by asking God for special favors. He recognized the truth of their being, the oneness that disease and limitation could not touch. And that recognition dissolved the appearance of separation. Let me share what happened to a woman named Margaret who studied with Joel Goldsmith for 3 years before this truth finally broke through her intellectual understanding. She had been suffering from a chronic illness that doctors could not diagnose or cure. She prayed daily, attended every spiritual lecture, read every mystical text, yet nothing changed in her condition. One morning during meditation, she stopped asking God to heal her body. She stopped affirming health or denying disease. Instead, she simply rested in the statement, "I and the Father are one." not as a repetition or mantra, but as a deep recognition of what was already true. In that moment of pure recognition, without effort or agenda, something shifted in her consciousness. Within 2 weeks, every symptom had disappeared completely, and they never returned. Her doctors were baffled, but Margaret understood what had happened. She had stopped trying to fix a sick mortal and recognized her true identity as the infinite expression of divine life. The illness was not healed. The illusion of separation was dissolved, and health was simply the natural state revealed. Another student, a businessman named Robert, faced bankruptcy after his company collapsed during an economic downturn. He had been practicing affirmations for prosperity, visualizing abundance, doing everything the success teachers told him to do. Nothing worked. His debt grew deeper and desperation consumed him daily as creditors demanded payment. Then Robert attended one of Joel's classes where he heard this teaching about oneness. At first he resisted it because it seemed too simple, too abstract for his concrete financial crisis. But desperation made him willing to try anything. He began each day not by worrying about money or visualizing checks, but by recognizing I and the Father are one, therefore infinite supply is my nature. Over the next 6 months, opportunities appeared that he could never have planned or predicted. A former colleague offered him a partnership. An unexpected inheritance came from a distant relative. New clients appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Within a year, Robert was not only debt-free, but more prosperous than before. The difference was that now he understood the source of his supply was consciousness itself, not circumstances. A third example comes from a mother whose teenage son had been arrested for drug possession and was facing serious jail time. She was consumed with fear, guilt, and helplessness. She blamed herself, blamed her ex-husband, blamed society. Her prayers were desperate pleas for God to intervene and fix her son, to change the judge's mind, to make the problem disappear magically. Joel Goldsmith taught her something radical that challenged everything she believed about prayer and healing. He told her to stop seeing her son as a troubled teenager who needed saving. Instead, recognize the truth of his being, that he too is one with the Father, that his true identity is divine consciousness, not the mistakes or the addiction or the legal trouble. For weeks, she practiced this recognition in silence, not trying to change her son, but resting in the truth of what he really was beneath all appearances. Gradually, her son began to change from within. He entered rehabilitation willingly, took responsibility for his actions, and the judge showed unexpected mercy. The external circumstances shifted because the mother's consciousness had shifted first from fear to recognition of oneness. These stories reveal a pattern that Joel Goldsmith observed throughout his decades of spiritual healing work. When people stop trying to demonstrate things and instead recognize their oneness with infinite consciousness, transformation happens naturally. The form it takes may vary, but the principle remains constant. Recognition of truth dissolves the appearance of separation and limitation. This is not positive thinking or mental manipulation. This is not about convincing yourself that problems do not exist. It is about recognizing what exists beyond the level of problem and solution. When you truly understand I and the Father are one, you are not fixing a broken reality. You are waking up from the dream of separation into the truth that has always been. The question is not whether this principle works. The question is whether you are willing to let go of your limited sense of self and recognize the infinite as your true identity. This requires a death of sorts, not physical death, but the death of the belief that you are a small, separate, vulnerable person at the mercy of circumstances beyond your control. If these transformation stories resonate with your heart and inspire your spiritual journey, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's wisdom. Subscribe for more mystical Christianity teachings and comment below which story touched you most deeply and why. Now let us explore practical techniques that help you live from this recognition of oneness throughout your day. The first technique Joel Goldsmith taught is what he called the practice of the presence. This is not complicated. It is simply pausing throughout your day to remember the infinite is here now as the very consciousness I am. Not somewhere else, not in the future, but here. When you wake in the morning, before your feet touch the floor, take 30 seconds to recognize, I and the Father are one. Not as words to achieve something, but as acknowledgement of what is already true. Let this recognition set the tone for your entire day. You are not a limited person hoping to connect with God. You are the presence of God awakening to itself in human form. During challenging moments at work, in relationships, or facing difficult decisions, pause again. Do not immediately react from fear or ego. Take a breath and remember your true identity. From this recognition, wisdom flows naturally. Solutions appear that the anxious human mind could never conceive. This is not magic. This is the natural intelligence of infinite consciousness operating through you when you stop blocking it with false identity. The second technique is what Joel called releasing the mental image. Every problem you face exists first as a mental image in your consciousness. You have a picture of yourself as sick, poor, alone, or inadequate. This mental image is what needs to dissolve, not the external circumstance. The circumstance is only the outer reflection of the inner image you hold. When you recognize I and the Father are one, you are releasing the mental image of yourself as a limited mortal. You are not trying to improve that image or make it better. You are letting it go completely and resting in your true identity as infinite consciousness. This is why affirmations often fail. They are trying to improve the false image rather than releasing it entirely. Practice this now with whatever challenge you face. Stop trying to solve it on the level of the problem. Stop trying to be a better version of your limited self. Instead, release the entire mental image of yourself as the one with the problem. Recognize that the real you, the I that is one with the Father, has no problem to solve because it is already complete, whole, and infinite. The third technique Joel taught is living by grace, not effort. When you understand your oneness with the Father, you realize that the infinite is living your life, not you. The divine intelligence that created galaxies and orchestrates nature is the same intelligence breathing your body, beating your heart, and guiding your path. You do not have to make things happen through struggle and force. This does not mean you become passive or lazy. It means you stop acting from anxiety and start acting from inspiration. You listen for the inner prompting, the gentle guidance that comes from recognizing yourself as the instrument through which infinite wisdom flows. Your actions become effortless because they arise from alignment with your true nature rather than from desperate human effort. Joel often said, "Do not try to demonstrate supply, health, or harmony. Let the Father demonstrate itself as these things through you." This shift from doing to allowing is the key. You are not the creator. You are the channel through which the creator expresses. When you try to be the creator, you exhaust yourself. When you recognize yourself as the channel, infinite energy flows through you without depletion. The fourth practice is maintaining what Joel called the altitude of consciousness. Your state of consciousness determines what you experience in the outer world. When you live from the recognition I and the Father are one, you are living at a high altitude where storms cannot reach you. Problems that devastate others cannot touch the consciousness that knows its oneness with the infinite. This altitude is not maintained through constant effort or vigilance. It is maintained through regular periods of silence and recognition. Joel recommended at least 2 periods daily where you withdraw from the world and rest in conscious oneness. Not to get something or achieve something, but simply to remember what is true. These periods of silence recharge your consciousness and keep you living from truth rather than appearances. During these silent times, do not fill your mind with words, affirmations, or requests. Simply be still and recognize the presence that you are. Let thoughts come and go without engaging them. Rest in the I am that needs nothing, seeks nothing, and lacks nothing. This is not meditation technique. This is conscious communion with your own true nature as one with the Father. But let us be honest about the challenges you will face in living this truth. Because Joel Goldsmith never sugar-coated the spiritual path. The first major obstacle is doubt. Your human mind will constantly question whether this oneness is really true. Every problem that appears will seem like evidence that you are separate, limited, and vulnerable. This doubt is natural and expected. Joel taught that doubt is not your enemy. It is simply the old consciousness resisting its own dissolution. When doubt arises, do not fight it or feel guilty about it. Simply return to recognition. I and the Father are one is not something you must believe. It is something you recognize as true despite what appearances suggest. Faith is not blind belief. Faith is loyalty. to truth, even when circumstances seem to contradict it. The second obstacle is impatience. You may practice this recognition for days or weeks and see no change in your circumstances. The human mind wants instant results, immediate proof. But consciousness transformation does not work on human timelines. Joel often said it took him years of practice before this truth became his living experience, rather than just an intellectual concept he understood. The third challenge is the influence of mass consciousness. You live in a world where billions of people believe in separation, limitation, and fear. This collective belief is powerful. It bombards you daily through media conversations and cultural conditioning. Even when you have moments of clear recognition, the weight of mass consciousness can pull you back into forgetfulness and doubt. Joel taught that you cannot change mass consciousness, but you can protect yourself from its influence. This requires vigilance, not in fighting against negativity, but in consciously choosing which consciousness you will accept as yours. When world news triggers fear, pause and remember, I and the Father are one. Therefore, I live in a different universe than the one presented by fearful appearances. This is not denial or avoiding reality. This is recognizing which reality is true. The world of separation, conflict, and limitation is the false reality created by collective human belief. The world of oneness, harmony, and infinite supply is the true reality created by divine consciousness. You choose which world you inhabit by the consciousness you maintain throughout your day. The fourth obstacle is the tendency to use this truth as a technique to get things, rather than as a revelation of what you already are. Many people hear I and the Father are one and immediately think, great, now I can use this to manifest money, heal my body, or attract my soulmate. This completely misses the point and blocks the very transformation you seek. Joel was very clear about this pitfall. He said that the moment you try to use spiritual truth for personal gain, you have lost the truth entirely. You have made God a servant to your human desires rather than recognizing that the human you think you are does not even exist. There is only God expressing His infinite forms, and you are one of those forms. When you truly understand I and the Father are one, you stop wanting things because you recognize you already are everything. The desire for more money implies lack. The desire for health implies disease. The desire for love implies loneliness. But the consciousness that knows its oneness with infinite fullness has no desires. It simply lives, expresses, and allows divine will to unfold perfectly. The fifth challenge is what Joel called taking thought, which means mentally planning, worrying, and trying to figure out how things will work. The human mind is addicted to control. It wants to know the plan, see the path, and manage the details. But living from oneness requires releasing mental control completely and trusting the intelligence that governs all creation. This does not mean you stop thinking or making practical decisions. It means you stop anxious thinking, fearful planning, and trying to manipulate outcomes. When you need to make a decision, you quiet your mind and listen for inner guidance. The answer comes not from analyzing pros and cons, but from the still small voice of infinite wisdom that knows exactly what is needed in every moment. Joel taught a simple practice for this. When faced with a decision, do not immediately engage your thinking mind. First, recognize your oneness with infinite intelligence. Wait in silence until you feel a sense of rightness about a particular direction. Then act on that inner knowing without second-guessing it. This is living by grace rather than by the mental gymnastics of the separated human mind. If these practical challenges and solutions are helping you to break through spiritual obstacles, like this video to support transformative content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith teachings, and comment which obstacle resonates most with your current journey. Now, let us explore how this recognition of oneness transforms specific areas of your life in ways that may surprise you. First, your relationship with money and supply changes completely when you understand that abundance is not something you get from the world. It is something that flows through you from the infinite consciousness that you are one with, expressing as every form of good. A student of Joel's was a school teacher, earning a modest salary. Constantly worried about making ends meet, she practiced recognizing her oneness with infinite supply daily, not to get more money, but to realize that her source was consciousness, not her paycheck. Within months, she inherited property from a relative she barely knew. Then her school district offered her a prestigious position with double her previous salary. But the real transformation was not in the increased income. It was in her complete freedom from financial anxiety. She knew with absolute certainty that regardless of circumstances, the infinite would always express as whatever was needed because she and the infinite were one. This inner knowing made her magnetic to opportunities that were invisible to consciousness. Still believing in lack and separation, your relationships transform dramatically when you recognize that the people in your life are not separate beings who can withhold love or approval from you. They are expressions of the one infinite consciousness just as you are. When you stop seeking fulfillment from others and recognize your oneness with infinite love, your relationships shift from needy transactions to free expressions of shared divinity. One man had been divorced 3 times, each relationship ending in bitterness and blame. He met Joel at a lecture and learned this principle of oneness. For the first time, he stopped looking for a woman to complete him, and instead recognized his completeness in oneness with the Father. He spent a year in this recognition without seeking any relationship at all. Then he met someone, but this time the relationship was completely different. There was no neediness, no fear of loss, no attempts to change or control the other person. Both individuals were whole, expressing their oneness with the infinite and choosing to share that expression together. The relationship thrived not because they needed each other, but because they were free to love without the burden of incompleteness. Your physical health transforms when you stop believing your body is a material object subject to disease, decay, and death. Joel taught that your body is consciousness made visible, the outer form of the infinite life that you are. When you recognize I and the Father are one, you realize that infinite life is your only life, and that life knows no disease or limitation. A woman diagnosed with a supposedly incurable condition attended Joel's classes regularly. She stopped all medical treatment, not out of rebellion, but out of deep recognition that her true life was spiritual and eternal. Every day she affirmed not as a mental exercise but as recognition of fact. The life I live is the life of the Father. Infinite life is expressing as this body, and infinite life knows no disease. Over 18 months, her symptoms gradually disappeared, and eventual medical tests showed no trace of the disease. Her doctors called it spontaneous remission. She called it recognition of truth. The body had not been healed. The false belief that her life was mortal and material had been dissolved, and health was simply the natural expression of infinite life that had always been present. Your work and life purpose transform when you stop believing you must find your purpose or create success through human effort. Joel taught that infinite consciousness already has a plan for its own expression through you. Your only job is to recognize your oneness and allow that divine plan to unfold without interference from human ambition, fear, or control. One young artist struggled for years trying to make a living from his paintings. Constantly rejected by galleries and ignored by critics, he was ready to quit and get a regular job when someone introduced him to Joel's teachings. He began practicing recognition of his oneness with infinite creativity. He stopped painting to please galleries or critics and simply allowed infinite creativity to express through him. Within a year, his work began attracting attention from unexpected sources. A prominent collector discovered him through a small local exhibition. Commissions began flowing. But more importantly, he found joy in the creative process itself because he was no longer creating from ego or need. He was the instrument through which infinite beauty expressed itself, and that expression naturally attracted its perfect channels of distribution and appreciation. As you live daily from this recognition of oneness, you begin to notice something profound happening in your consciousness. The things that used to disturb you no longer have power over you. The opinions of others, the fluctuations of circumstances, the threats of the world lose their ability to shake your inner foundation. You have found the rock upon which Christ told you to build your house. This is not because you have become cold or indifferent. You still engage with life fully, perhaps more fully than before, but you engage from a different place. You engage as the infinite expressing temporarily in human form rather than as a frightened mortal hoping to survive and thrive in a hostile world. This shift in identity changes everything about how you experience each moment. Joel called this state living in the secret place of the Most High. It is a consciousness that knows itself as one with God, therefore untouchable by anything that belongs to the world of appearances. Problems still arise, challenges still appear, but they cannot penetrate the consciousness that rests in recognized oneness. They are like storms that rage on the surface while the depths remain eternally still and peaceful. You also discover that the more you live from this recognition, the less you feel the need to convince others or defend your beliefs. Truth needs no defense. When you know your oneness with the Father, you have nothing to prove. You simply live your life as a witness to that truth, and those who are ready will recognize it without any persuasion from you. This eliminates the exhausting need to argue, convince, or convert anyone to your way of seeing. Joel taught that consciousness is not changed by words or arguments. It is changed by recognition. When you live from oneness, you carry a vibration that others can feel even if they cannot articulate it. Some will be drawn to you and want to know your secret. Others will resist or reject you. Either response is perfect. Your only responsibility is to maintain your own recognition of truth. You are not here to save the world or fix anyone else. You are here to recognize your oneness with the Father and allow that recognition to dissolve any appearance of separation in your own experience. As you do this, you become a light in the darkness, not through preaching or teaching, but through being what you truly are. There comes a moment in this practice when intellectual understanding becomes living experience. Joel described it as a shift that cannot be explained. Only known. You are no longer trying to believe I and the Father are one. You simply know it with a knowing that requires no external validation or proof. This knowing becomes the foundation of your entire existence. When this shift happens, prayer becomes entirely different. You do not pray to change God's mind or get God to do something. You pray simply to recognize what is already true. Your prayer becomes, reveal to me the truth of this situation. Show me what is real beyond the appearance. And in the silence that follows, truth reveals itself not as words, but as knowing, as peace, as the dissolution of whatever seemed to be a problem. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "My peace I give to you, not as the world gives." The peace the world offers is temporary, dependent on circumstances being favorable. The peace that comes from recognizing your oneness with the Father is permanent, independent of any circumstance. It is the peace of knowing who you really are beyond all the false identities that the world has taught you to embrace. So here is what happens when you truly understand what Jesus meant by I and the Father are one. You stop living as a separate fragment, hoping to connect with something greater. You recognize yourself as the very presence of infinite consciousness expressing in this particular time and space. You realize that every quality of God is your quality because there is no separation. This recognition does not make you arrogant or superior to others. It makes you humble because you realize you can take no credit for anything. The infinite is living your life. You are simply the transparency through which it shines. Your only task is to remain clear, to not block the light with false beliefs, fears, and limitations that arise from the illusion of separation. Joel Goldsmith spent his life teaching this one truth in countless ways. You are not separate from God. You are not distant from the kingdom. You are not waiting to become spiritual. You are already the fullness of infinite consciousness expressing itself. The moment you recognize this, your search ends and your real life begins. Not the life of striving and becoming, but the life of being and expressing what you have always been. If your understanding of Jesus' deepest teaching has been transformed through these Joel Goldsmith insights, like this video now. Subscribe for more mystical wisdom and comment. I am one with the Father to claim this truth as your living reality.